I still remember how it all began, with a cough. Not the sharp bark of someone choking on city smog, nor the dry rasp from recycled office air, but a wet, persistent tickle lodged deep in my throat, like a seed waiting to sprout. At first, I barely noticed it. In London's East End, where I worked, coughing was as common as rain. The air was thick with factory smoke and exhaust fumes. The water tasted like old pipes, and the packed underground trains carried more germs than a toddler's toy box. Cough was nothing, less than nothing. But this one didn't go away. I'm Tom Harris, a medic's assistant at St. Bartholomew's Clinic, tucked away beneath the city's industrial sprawl, a place where the desperate came for help, or at least for a moment's relief. We saw it all. Chemical burns from nearby plants, lung diseases from the factories, and strange illnesses that no one wanted to talk about openly. I thought I knew what suffering was. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday when she first walked in. Tuesdays were usually quiet, a brief pause between the weekend injuries and the midweek industrial accidents. She looked about 20, pale and drawn, like someone who'd spent too many nights working the late shift in a meatpacking plant. Her name was Emily, and she'd come because of the cough. She said it had been getting worse for weeks. She opened her mouth for me to examine, and that's when I saw it. The subtle green tint to her gums, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. The saliva at the corners of her mouth was thicker than normal, with an oily sheen that caught the flickering clinic light wrong. Her breath carried a sickly sweet scent, like flowers wilting in stagnant water. I handed her the usual antibiotics, assured her the symptoms would pass. They always did. Ha! If only I'd been right. 3 days later, she was back. Worse. The cough was fiercer, and now there were strange lesions along her arms. Small, coin-sized sores with edges that pulsed almost like they had a heartbeat. The skin around them looked waxy, and when I pressed gently, a clear, foul-smelling fluid oozed out. It reeked of rot mixed with something sweet and oddly enticing. I referred her to the hospital uptown, where they had better gear and cleaner beds. But she never made it. By the time the ambulance arrived, Emily was sitting outside the clinic, laughing. Not the bitter, cynical laugh you hear from people beaten down by life, but a deep, raw sound that seemed to bubble up from somewhere inside her. She told me the pain was gone, that she felt peaceful for the first time in years. 3 hours later, the transport crew found her slumped in an alley 2 blocks away, dead, or so they thought. When they moved her, her eyes snapped open, and she smiled. Then the reports were buried, the body incinerated, and the incident erased. But I remembered. I had been there. I breathed her air, touched her skin, heard her laugh. And 3 days later, the cough started in me. I tried to treat it myself, of course. I'm a medic's assistant, not some amateur. I ran tests, took samples, dosed myself with every antibiotic we had. The results? Normal. Better than normal. My blood counts suggested a strong immune system. My heart was fine. By all scientific measures, I was healthy, except for the cough and the dreams. Sleep was never easy in the East End's underground. The constant drone of machinery, the distant shouts and sirens, the crushing knowledge that millions lived packed into the city's bowels. But now, sleep brought visions more vivid than waking life. I dreamed of gardens that stretched beyond sight, filled with plants growing from decay, fruit pulsing like a heartbeat. Trees wept golden sap, their leaves whispered secrets in languages I'd never learned but somehow understood. In these dreams, the flowers reached for me with soft tendrils, warm against my skin. Their touch was comfort like nothing I'd known alive. The air smelled thick with spores that made my lungs sing clean for the first time in decades. At the heart of it all stood a presence, massive yet intimate, eyes like festering wounds, loving me with a patience eternal and complete. I woke feeling oddly refreshed, despite the restless night. My body tingled with an almost forbidden pleasure. For a moment, the gray despair of the underground vanished, replaced by something warm and green. But as dawn broke, reality crashed back, with the cough and a growing certainty that something was changing deep inside me. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope stretched between two worlds. By daylight, I was the same Tom, Grimy hands, worn leather jacket, scuffed boots, shuffling through the cramped wards of St. Bart's Clinic. But beneath the surface, the transformation was creeping in, subtle yet relentless. My skin took on a faint greenish hue, most noticeable around my knuckles and the thin skin behind my ears. I caught glimpses of tiny gold flecks glimmering in my eyes when the clinic's flickering fluorescent lights caught them just right. My cough worsened, hacking up thick, viscous mucus that smelled faintly of honey and rot. A scent so strange it made my stomach twist, and yet I found myself strangely mesmerized by it. I'd examine the sputum under the microscope during quiet moments, marveling at the impossible shapes within, delicate, flower-like formations, translucent and pulsing as if alive. I knew it made no sense, but I couldn't look away. It was like staring at a stained glass window made of flesh, each petal shimmering with a life all its own. The other staff started to notice changes, though none dared say it aloud. Dr. Matthews, the clinic's senior physician, a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair and steel-rimmed glasses, remarked one afternoon that my bedside manner had improved. "Patients seem calmer around you," he said, his voice tinged with suspicion but also curiosity. Mrs. Collins, a regular patient with arthritis, so severe her fingers curled like gnarled roots, told me, "Your hands feel warmer, Tom, like they're alive." She blushed when she said it, as if confessing a sin. After my visits, she reported sleeping better, and for the first time in months, her appetite was returning. I shrugged it off as placebo effect, but deep down I knew better. My touch was changing them, not curing in any conventional sense, but transforming how they related to their pain. Where once they fought tooth and nail to deny suffering, they now accepted it, even embraced it. Pain was no longer an enemy but a language, a way to connect to something greater. I found myself moving through the wards with a new kind of patience, genuinely interested in their stories, their struggles, their humanity. It was as if a veil had lifted, and I could see the hidden threads weaving us all together. One evening, as I finished restocking supplies, I caught a glimpse of myself in the clinic's grimy mirror. The green tint was unmistakable now, and my eyes, God, those eyes, held a depth I couldn't explain. I ran a hand through my disheveled hair, feeling the strange comfort of change even as fear gnawed at the edges of my mind. Sleep remained elusive, but the dreams grew stronger. The garden became more vivid, more detailed. I could feel the soft, loamy earth beneath my feet, rich with the decomposed remains of countless generations. The air shimmered with pollen and spores that filled my lungs with a joy I'd never known. And always, at the center, the presence watched, patient and eternal. Sometimes it whispered secrets in that ancient language, filling me with both dread and wonder. I began to wonder, was this the beginning of the end, or something far more profound? One night, during a particularly quiet shift, I heard singing from the isolation ward. A haunting, rich contralto that wrapped around the cold metal walls like a balm. The melody was strange, ancient, tugging at something buried deep in my soul. Curiosity pulled me toward bed 7, where Jeremiah Cole lay. Jeremiah, a factory worker badly burned in an acid spill weeks ago, was supposed to be dying. His body was ravaged. Skin melted away in patches, muscle and bone exposed. Yet, there he was sitting upright and singing. His wounds had changed. What should have been festering sores now bloomed with tiny, phosphorescent growths that swayed gently as he breathed, casting a soft green glow that lit the sterile room like a forest at twilight. He looked at me with clouded eyes that seemed to move, shifting like living things beneath the surface. "You hear it too, don't you?" His voice carried a strange harmonic, as if the growths themselves were singing through him. "The song," he said, "it's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen. I wanted to deny it, to cling to logic and reason. But deep inside, I knew he was right. I could hear it, the subtle hum beneath the city's machinery, the whispered music threading through the air vents and pipes. A song of growth and decay, of life feeding on death, of beauty born from rot. It started with a cough," I said softly, almost afraid to give it voice. Jeremiah smiled, that radiant, terrible smile. It always starts that way. The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift. I swallowed hard. This isn't a gift. It's a disease.
A corruption.
He shook his head. Pain is gone. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle. How is that corruption? I wanted to argue, to fall back on medical texts and the cold comfort of doctrine. But standing there, bathed in that green light, listening to the song that made my soul ache, I felt the first cracks in my certainty. Something fundamental was shifting, and I wasn't sure if I was the one who was changing or the world itself. The days slipped by, each one blurring into the next like watercolors bleeding on damp paper. My cough deepened, and with it, the strange new life within me grew bolder. When I caught my reflection now, I barely recognized the man staring back. A shadow of pale green tinged skin, eyes flecked with gold that flickered like candlelight just beyond my focus. My hands, once rough and calloused, now seemed softer, almost delicate, yet oddly alive, as if tiny roots pulsed beneath the surface. The mornings were the hardest. The moment I opened my mouth, a thick, viscous mucus escaped, sweet and sour all at once, carrying with it the faintest hint of those impossible flower-like cells that mocked every lesson I'd ever learned. I tried to laugh it off, but even my cough sounded different. Less a nuisance and more a song, a strange melody that hummed just beneath the surface. One afternoon, Mrs. Collins caught my hand as I was leaving her bedside. She was dressed in a modest blue dress, the fabric worn but neat, her silver hair pulled back into a loose bun that softened the sharp angles of her face. Her arthritis-ridden fingers, once curled and stiff, now flexed with a fluid grace that defied years of pain. "Tom," she said, her voice trembling. "Your touch, it's like the first warmth I've felt in decades. It's not just comfort, it's transformation." I smiled, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "It's the power of hope, Mrs. Collins," I replied, though the words felt thin. In truth, I was beginning to believe it was more than that. My hands weren't just healing, they were changing something fundamental in the people I touched. That evening, Dr. Matthews summoned me to his cramped office. The room smelled of stale tea and old paper, a single bare bulb casting harsh shadows on his lined face. "Tom," he began cautiously, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Patients are speaking of unusual experiences, dreams of gardens, of peace with their pain. And your bedside manner, well, it's improved in ways I can't quite explain." He paused, searching my face for answers. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but this isn't standard medical practice. Are you sure you're all right?" I wanted to laugh, to say I was fine, that it was all in their heads. Instead, I found myself nodding slowly. "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just learning to listen." The dreams haunted me more each night. The impossible garden had become a sanctuary. Vast fields stretching beyond sight, where flowers grew from decay and fruit pulsed like beating hearts. The air was thick with pollen and spores that made my lungs sing with joy. I wandered among towering trees whose bark wept golden sap, their leaves whispering secrets in a language older than time. At the center stood the presence. Massive, patient, with eyes like festering wounds that somehow radiated love. Its gaze was both terrifying and comforting, a paradox I couldn't unravel. I felt it watching, waiting for me to understand. One night, as the clinic's hum softened and the city's distant sirens faded, a strange melody drifted from the isolation ward. It was a rich contralto voice, singing an ancient, unfamiliar song that wrapped the cold metal walls in warmth. Drawn by the sound, I found myself at bed 7, where Jeremiah Cole lay. Jeremiah's body had transformed. The acid burns that should have consumed him now bloomed with tiny phosphorescent growths, casting a soft green glow like bioluminescent fungi. They swayed gently with each breath, illuminating the sterile room with an otherworldly light. He sat upright, eyes clouded yet alive with a strange clarity. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice carrying harmonics from the growths themselves. "The song," he continued. "It's always been here. We're too healthy to listen." I wanted to deny it, to cling to science and reason, but deep inside, I knew the truth. The song threaded through the air vents, the pipes, the very bones of the city. A symphony of growth and decay, life feeding on death. It began with a cough, I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant, terrible. The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift. Gift? I scoffed. This is a disease, a corruption. Pain has left me. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle. How is that corruption? I had no answer. The walls seemed to breathe. The green light pulsed, and the song swelled. Something ancient and vast was awakening, and I was caught in its embrace. The change was no longer something I feared. It was becoming part of me, and I feared what I might become. The clinic felt different after that night. The walls seemed to pulse softly, as if breathing alongside me. I caught myself staring longer at the peeling paint and rusted pipes, noticing delicate tendrils of green creeping along the edges, like ivy reclaiming forgotten ruins. It was as if the very building was awakening, joining in the strange transformation that gripped us all. My cough had deepened into a rhythm, a slow, deliberate beat that echoed in my chest. The mucus I expelled was no longer just disgusting. It was alive, a shimmering mass of tiny flower-like structures that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. I'd spend hours examining them under the microscope, captivated by their beauty and horror. They weren't just cells, they were art, vibrant and alien. Despite the changes, I kept my routine. I moved through the crowded wards of St. Bartholomew's, my worn boots echoing on the cracked linoleum, the faint scent of antiseptic mingling with the earthy aroma that now clung to me. Patients looked at me differently, some with hope, others with unease. But many found comfort in my presence, their pain easing not because it vanished, but because they learned to live with it. Mrs. Collins was the most remarkable. Once stooped and trembling, she now moved with a grace that belied decades of suffering. Her once gnarled fingers flexed like young branches swaying in a gentle breeze. She wore a soft lavender dress that evening, its delicate lace collar framing her silver hair pulled into a loose chignon. Her eyes sparkled as she whispered, "Tom, you've given me a gift I never thought possible. Not to be cured, but to be free." I wanted to believe it was all in her mind, a placebo born of kindness. But I felt the warmth in my hands, the strange energy that flowed from me to her. Something fundamental was shifting, not just in my patients, but in me. Dr. Matthews called me into his office one gray Thursday. The room was cluttered with medical journals and half-empty teacups, the air thick with the scent of old paper and brewing storm outside. He looked at me over his glasses, his expression a mix of concern and fascination. "Tom," he began slowly, "I've received reports. Patients are describing unusual experiences, dreams of gardens, of peace with their pain. And your bedside manner, it's changed. People listen when you speak, even when what you say defies logic." I swallowed hard. "I'm just trying to help," I replied, though the words felt hollow. He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You're walking a fine line. The hospital board has noticed. There are whispers about unconventional methods. Be careful, careful." The word hung in the air like a warning. But I knew I couldn't turn back. Not now. That night, the dreams returned with vivid intensity. I wandered through that impossible garden again, the soil soft beneath my feet, rich with the decay of forgotten lives. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors, their petals pulsing gently like hearts. Trees towered above, their bark weeping golden sap, leaves whispering secrets I almost understood. At the center, the presence waited, massive and patient, eyes like festering wounds that somehow radiated a love both terrifying and pure. It watched me with infinite patience, urging me to understand. The next day, as I made my rounds, I felt a strange pull toward the isolation ward. The door creaked open under my hand, revealing Jeremiah Cole's room. The factory worker who should have been dead weeks ago now sat upright, bathed in the soft green glow of phosphorescent growths blossoming from his acid-ravaged skin. His eyes, clouded and shifting, met mine. You hear it too, don't you? His voice carried a strange harmony, as if the growths themselves were singing. The song, he said. It's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen. I nodded, words failing me. It began with a cough, I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant, terrible. The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift. Gift, I scoffed. This is a disease, a corruption. He shook his head. Pain has left me. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle. How is that corruption? The green light pulsed softly, and the song swelled, filling the room. I was no longer afraid. I was part of something vast and ancient, caught in a transformation both terrifying and beautiful. As I left the ward, a chill ran down my spine. The world I knew was slipping away, replaced by something new, something alive. And I couldn't help but wonder, how far would this change reach before it claimed us all? The following days felt like I was caught between two worlds, neither fully human nor yet something else. The green tint to my skin deepened, especially around the knuckles and collarbone, and my cough had become a persistent rhythm, almost musical in its cadence. When I coughed up the thick, viscous sputum, it shimmered faintly under the flickering clinic lights, filled with those strange flower-like cellular structures that no microscope should ever reveal. It was beautiful and grotesque all at once, a twisted masterpiece of nature. My hands, once rough and calloused from years of manual labor and late-night shifts, now felt almost warm to the touch, as if subtle currents of life pulsed beneath my skin. Patience noticed. Mrs. Collins, draped in a soft lavender dress that swayed gently as she moved, told me with a trembling smile, "Tom, your hands, they carry something beyond healing. It's as if you're waking something inside us all." Her arthritic fingers flexed freely now, a stark contrast to the brittle joints I'd known just weeks before. I wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to hope or placebo, but deep down I sensed the truth. I was no longer just a medic's assistant. I was a conduit for something greater, something ancient and alive. Dr. Matthews called me into his cramped office one stormy afternoon. The room smelled of stale tea and damp paper, the dim light casting long shadows across his lined face. "Tom," he began, adjusting his glasses. "There are murmurs, patients speaking of dreams, of strange peace with their pain. Your methods, they're unconventional. The hospital board is uneasy." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm just trying to help," I said quietly, though even I wasn't sure what form that help was taking. He sighed. "Be cautious. This path could lead to consequences none of us can foresee." That night, the dreams returned with renewed intensity. I wandered through the impossible garden, fields stretching beyond sight, where flowers blossomed from decay and fruits pulsed like living hearts. Trees wept golden sap, their leaves whispering secrets in an ancient tongue I almost understood. At the garden's center stood the presence, massive, patient, eyes like festering wounds that somehow radiated an overwhelming love. It watched me, waiting, urging me to accept what was coming. Drawn by a haunting melody, I found myself once more at the isolation ward. There, Jeremiah Cole sat upright, his skin a tapestry of glowing phosphorescent growths that pulsed gently with each breath. His clouded eyes met mine, voice carrying harmonics from the strange blooms enveloping him. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked softly. "The song," he continued. "It's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen." "It began with a cough," I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant and terrible. "The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift." "Gift?" I scoffed. "This is disease, corruption." He shook his head. "Pain is gone. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle." "How is that corruption?" The green glow bathed the room, the song swelling until it filled every corner. Fear fled, replaced by awe and a strange solace. I was no longer alone. Something vast, ancient, and alive was awakening within us all. As I stepped back into the dim corridors of the clinic, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The city outside seemed distant, the world I knew slipping away like sand through clenched fingers. What was coming would change everything. And I wondered with a sinking certainty, how far would this transformation spread before it consumed us all? The clinic had become a place suspended between reality and something else entirely. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The faint scent of antiseptic mingled with an earthy aroma, like damp soil after rain, filling the stale air. I moved through the cramped corridors, my worn leather shoes barely making a sound on the cracked linoleum, yet every step felt heavier, as if the very building was alive, breathing alongside me. My reflection in the cracked mirror of the staff bathroom startled me. The greenish tint to my skin was no longer subtle. It had deepened, shading my neck and the backs of my hands like a creeping vine. My eyes caught the light strangely, flecks of gold dancing beneath the surface, shifting as if alive. I coughed again, the sound resonating low and rhythmic, and the thick, honeyed mucus that followed shimmered faintly, alive with those impossible flower-like structures that defied explanation. Mrs. Collins awaited me in her small room, the soft lavender of her dress contrasting with the pale green light that filtered through the grimy window. Her silver hair was pinned loosely, strands falling softly around her worn yet serene face. As I reached out to touch her arthritic hands, she smiled, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Tom," she whispered, "your touch carries warmth I thought lost forever. It's as if you're not just healing my body, but awakening something inside me." I wanted to dismiss it as mere comfort, but the truth simmered beneath my skin like a secret I couldn't ignore. Later, Dr. Matthews beckoned me into his cluttered office, the scent of cold tea and old paper heavy in the air. His eyes searched mine, a mix of concern and curiosity shadowing his face. "Tom, there are murmurs among the staff and patients alike, dreams of gardens, of peace with pain, reports that defy medical understanding. Your methods, they're becoming unorthodox. The hospital board is watching." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm just trying to help," I said softly, though I wasn't sure what I was becoming. He sighed, pressing his palms together. "Be careful. This path you walk, it could lead to consequences none of us foresee." That night, sleep eluded me, but the dreams came sharper than ever. I wandered the impossible garden, fields of vibrant flowers blooming from decay, fruits pulsing with life. Towering trees wept golden sap, their leaves whispering ancient secrets in a language I barely grasped. At the heart of it stood the presence, massive and patient, eyes like festering wounds radiating a love both terrifying and pure. It watched me, urging acceptance. Drawn by a haunting melody, I found myself once again before the isolation ward's door. Inside, Jeremiah Cole sat upright, his skin transformed into a living canvas of phosphorescent growths that pulsed gently with his breath. His clouded eyes met mine, voice harmonizing with the strange blooms enveloping him. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked. "The song," he continued. "It's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen." "It began with a cough," I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant, terrible. "The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift." "Gift?" I scoffed. "This is disease, corruption." He shook his head. "Pain is gone. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle." "How is that corruption?" The green glow bathed the room as the song swelled, filling every corner. Fear fled, replaced by awe and strange solace. I was no longer alone. Something vast, ancient, and alive was awakening within us all. Leaving the ward, a chill ran down my spine. The world I'd known was slipping away, replaced by something new and unknowable. And I couldn't shake the question that echoed in my mind. How far would this transformation spread before it claimed us all? The days blurred into a strange new rhythm, each one unraveling the familiar and weaving in threads of something utterly alien. The clinic's walls, once cold and sterile, now seemed alive, subtle veins of green creeping beneath peeling paint, faint pulses of light flickering where rust once ruled. Even the air felt different, thick with an earthy musk that clung to my skin and filled my lungs with each breath. My cough had become a relentless drumbeat, a steady cadence that echoed deep within my chest. When I expelled the thick, viscous sputum, it shimmered faintly under the flickering lights, an intricate tangle of flower-like cellular structures, delicate and grotesque. I found myself drawn to the microscope, unable to look away from the impossible beauty it revealed. They were alive, yes, but alive in a way that defied every rule I'd learned. My hands had changed too. What had once been rough, scarred from years in the underbelly of the city, were now warm and strangely supple. Patience noticed. Mrs. Collins, her lavender dress soft against the dim light, reached for my hand with a smile that was both tender and trembling. "Tom," she whispered, "your touch carries something I can't explain, something that stirs the soul." I wanted to dismiss it, to cling to logic and reason, but deep inside, I knew the truth. I was no longer merely a medic's assistant. I was becoming a vessel for something vast and ancient. Dr. Matthews summoned me again. His office cluttered and dim, the weight of his words pressing down like the humid air before a storm. "Tom," he said carefully, "reports are reaching the board. Patients speak of dreams, visions of gardens, of peace with their pain. Your methods, they say, are unconventional." I met his gaze, the gold flecks in my eyes catching the low light. "I'm just trying to help," I replied quietly. He sighed, a weary sound. "Be wary. The path you tread is dangerous, not just for you, but for all of us." That night, the garden called once more. I wandered among impossible blooms that grew from decay, fruits pulsing like living hearts. Towering trees wept golden sap, their leaves murmuring secrets in a language older than time. At the garden's center stood the presence, massive and patient, eyes like festering wounds radiating a love both terrifying and pure. It watched me, waiting for me to understand. Drawn by a haunting melody, I found myself before the isolation ward's door again. Inside, Jeremiah Cole sat upright, his skin a living tapestry of glowing phosphorescent growths that pulsed with each breath. His clouded eyes met mine, voice harmonizing with the strange blooms enveloping him. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked. "The song," he continued. "It's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen." "It began with a cough," I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant, terrible. "The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift." "Gift?" I scoffed. "This is disease, corruption." He shook his head. "Pain is gone. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle." "How is that corruption?" The green glow bathed the room as the song swelled, filling every corner. Fear fled, replaced by awe and strange solace. I was no longer alone. Something vast, ancient, and alive was awakening within us all. As I stepped back into the dim corridors, a cold shiver ran down my spine. The world I'd known was slipping away, replaced by something new. And I knew one thing with chilling certainty: there was no turning back. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog of shifting realities. The clinic, once a place of sterile routine, had become a nexus of transformation. The walls seemed to pulse softly, veins of green spreading beneath cracked paint, the faint hum of life thrumming through the very air. Even the harsh fluorescent lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced like living things. My cough had settled into a strange rhythm, a slow, deliberate beat echoing in my chest. When I coughed up the thick, viscous sputum, it shimmered faintly, alive with those impossible flower-like structures that defied all logic. I found myself drawn to the microscope for hours, entranced by their delicate, pulsing forms, strange blossoms blooming from decay. My hands, once rough and scarred by years of hard labor, now felt warm and strangely alive. Patience noticed. Mrs. Collins, dressed in a soft lilac blouse that complemented her silver hair, grasped my hand with a tenderness that shook me. "Tom," she whispered, "your touch carries a warmth I thought lost forever. It's more than healing. It's awakening. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the familiar, but deep inside, I knew the truth. I was no longer just a medic's assistant. I was a vessel for something ancient and alive. Dr. Matthews summoned me to his cluttered office, the air thick with the scent of old books and stale tea. His eyes searched mine, a mixture of concern and wonder. "Tom, reports are reaching the board. Patients speak of visions, of peace found in pain. Your methods are unorthodox." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm just trying to help," I said softly. He sighed. "Be careful. This path could lead to consequences none of us foresee." That night, the garden called me again. I wandered through fields of impossible flowers blooming from decay, fruits pulsing with life. Towering trees wept golden sap, their leaves whispering secrets in an ancient tongue. At the center stood the presence. Massive, patient, eyes like festering wounds radiating a love both terrifying and pure. It watched me, urging acceptance. Drawn by a haunting melody, I found myself before the isolation ward's door. Inside, Jeremiah Cole sat upright, his skin a tapestry of glowing phosphorescent growths pulsing gently with his breath. His clouded eyes met mine, voice harmonizing with the strange blooms enveloping him. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked. "The song," he continued. "It's always been here. We were just too healthy to listen." "It began with a cough," I whispered. Jeremiah's smile was radiant, terrible. "The grandfather is patient. He waits until we're ready to receive the gift." "Gift?" I scoffed. "This is disease, corruption." He shook his head. "Pain is gone. Clarity has come. For the first time, I understand my place in the cycle." "How is that corruption?" The green glow bathed the room, the song swelling until it filled every corner. Fear fled, replaced by awe and strange solace. I was no longer alone. Something vast, ancient, alive was awakening within us all. Leaving the ward, a chill ran down my spine. The world I'd known was slipping away, replaced by something new and unknowable. And I knew, beyond doubt, the transformation was only beginning. The change was no longer subtle. It was a tide rising, unstoppable and all-encompassing. The clinic no longer felt like a place of healing, but a sanctuary caught between worlds. A threshold where the old and the new collided in a dance both beautiful and terrifying. I woke each morning to the faintest hint of green beneath my skin, the golden flecks in my eyes catching the pale dawn light like stars awakening after a long night. My cough had become a deep, resonant hum, a song that vibrated through my chest and spilled into the air, carrying with it spores, tiny seeds of change that drifted silently around the ward. Patients whispered of dreams that bloomed into waking visions. Mrs. Collins, wrapped in a soft mauve shawl, told me how her arthritis now sang with a rhythm she could almost dance to. Thomas, a burly factory worker with lungs scarred by years of smoke, spoke of breathing as if playing an instrument, each gasp a note in a symphony only he could hear. Sarah, whose skin was once marred by chemical burns, now bore delicate, petal-like scales that shimmered and shifted with her moods, blooming like a garden in sunlight. Dr. Matthews watched these transformations with a mix of awe and apprehension. One evening, as rain hammered the clinic windows, he pulled me aside. "Tom," he said quietly, "the board has sent inspectors. They're coming to investigate these anomalies. They won't understand what's happening here. This could mean the end." I nodded, the weight of his words settling like a stone in my chest. "Then we must be ready." The night before the inspectors arrived, the garden called to me once more. I stood among the impossible blooms, the air thick with pollen and the scent of earth and decay. The presence watched with eyes like festering wounds that burned with patient love. It whispered truths older than time, urging acceptance, transformation. When the inspectors came, clad in black uniforms with cold, unyielding faces hidden behind polished masks, they moved through the clinic like shadows of judgment. Their questions were sharp, their accusations sharper. "Unapproved practices," they intoned. "Heresy. Corruption." I stood before them, coughing the strange song from deep within my lungs. As I sang, spores drifted into the sterile air, weaving through the cold metal like soft green smoke. The walls seemed to breathe, vines unfurling where rust had ruled. Patience stirred, their transformed forms awakening in a chorus of life and decay. The inspectors faltered, their rigid resolve cracking under the weight of the living song. One by one, they fell to their knees, faces changing. Hard lines softening into expressions of wonder, fear melting into awe. The transformation had begun, not just in us, but in them. The old world was dying, and from its ashes, a new garden was growing. As I looked around the ward, alive with shifting forms and whispered melodies, I knew this was only the beginning. The cough that started it all had become a song that would echo beyond these walls, beyond the city, beyond the stars. And somewhere, deep within the shifting shadows, the grandfather waited, patient and eternal. What would come next? That was a question only time dared to answer. The clinic had become unrecognizable, a living, breathing organism woven from flesh and metal, decay and growth. The air shimmered with spores that danced like fireflies caught in a perpetual twilight. Walls pulsed softly, veins of green wrapping around rusted pipes, blossoming into strange flowers that hummed with a life of their own. The patients were no longer confined to their beds. They moved with fluid grace, their bodies a symphony of transformation, skin blooming like petals, breath carrying melodies that wove through the air. Dr. Matthews, once a man bound by rigid doctrine, now stood beside me transformed. His eyes gleamed with golden light, his voice carrying the harmonics of the new song that united us all. "Tom," he said, "the hive is no longer just a place of suffering. It is becoming something greater, a nexus of evolution, a garden where life and machine merge." Outside, the city's underbelly was changing too. The air recycling systems carried spores far beyond the clinic's walls, seeding other districts, other hospitals. Reports of strange dreams, inexplicable recoveries, and subtle transformations began to surface across London's industrial depths. The old order fought back. Redeployment teams clad in black, flammers and purifiers seeking to snuff out the burgeoning life. But their efforts only fueled the spread, each act of destruction scattering spores like wildfire. The grandfather's patience was infinite, his reach boundless. From the depths of the hive, his garden was growing, weaving through metal and flesh, thought and machine. The line between human and something else blurred, dissolved, and reformed into a new harmony. As I stood at the heart of this living cathedral, the cough that had begun it all echoed within me. Not a sign of decay, but a herald of metamorphosis. The song rose, carrying with it the promise of transformation beyond comprehension. And yet, beyond the veil of this new reality, a shadow lingered, a question unanswered, a secret waiting to bloom. What lay beyond the garden's edge? The answer, I knew, was not yet ready to be heard. But when it came, it would change everything. And I would be there to sing its song.